and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah.
And today we are taking another step on our journey to the center of the disc world. World.
You brought that up much earlier than I was expecting.
I just wanted to see your face.
My horrified face.
But before we start talking about that, Sarah, other than my excellent introduction, what's something great that happened lately?
Something great that happened lately is that I impulse purchased tickets to Athens, Greece in April.
I was going to say, not Georgia, right?
Not Georgia. So I'm going to Greece in April. I think that I am flying for almost as long as I will be in Athens.
Jesus.
That's fine. I mean, I think I'm in Athens for technically it's 4 nights, but it's only 4 nights on a very small technicality because I land at 12:55 in the morning. And so I do have to get a hotel. But I'm not going to bed at a reasonable hour. But I don't care. I'm going to Greece. Fuck it.
I mean, it's something to do.
And the reason I impulse purchased it was that the tickets were cheaper than normal. So
you don't have to justify going to Greece.
I feel like I have to justify going to Greece when I'm only staying there for 3 days, basically.
It's 3 days longer than I'm going to be in Greece.
That's true.
Unless I show you up and I'm going to go live there for 3 months. Take that, Sarah.
I mean, if you went and lived there for 3 months, I would go and visit you and stay there for much longer than 3 weeks. I mean, than 3 days. I would stay with you for longer than 3 weeks too, probably.
I mean, I'm petty, but I'm not that petty.
I feel like you should be that petty so that I can go and visit you and stay there for a long time.
I'll see what I can do, but don't hold your breath.
Okay.
My good thing is that we released 3 episodes in 8 days or something absurd like that. Technically not 1 week, but it sure did feel like it when I was editing.
Wednesday to Wednesday.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure there's wild applause in the background right now.
You could edit that in.
I deserve it. Yeah. Making more editing work for myself, which I'm sure I won't complain about at all to you over text later.
I mean, to be honest, it's kind of par for the course.
Yeah. But I did it. I fucking did it. None of them were too much later than we planned.
I mean, really, the bonus episode was 1 day later than we had planned on getting it out. That's nothing. It's a bonus episode.
Yeah.
Everything else came out the day that we planned for it.
Yep.
Before noon.
And I'm riding on that technicality.
It's not late if it's before noon.
Okay. So I'm feeling very accomplished and have subsequently done very little since then, which is why we're recording late today. I had to finish the book.
Who could have foreseen this coming?
Me, when I was complaining about it all week to you. I'm only complaining that I didn't have enough hours in the day. I wasn't complaining about actually editing. I feel like
I do. I know.
Yeah. If I had infinite time, I would have no problem spending the time editing. But sometimes I have to pick between that and I did skip putting the trash out last week because I was just it's fine.
Well, we're all very grateful for your sacrifice.
You're welcome. Sarah, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking Blindwood cider. It is verbena and elderflower.
Ooh, that sounds like summer.
It's a very summery drink. I think it's one of their seasonal specials. And I probably should have drunk it earlier because it is not quite summer anymore. Still hot though, so it feels appropriate. What are you drinking tonight?
Water.
And
I mean, technically the question is, what am I drinking tonight?
I see that Jell-O you're eating.
Yeah,
I know it's not just Jell-O. And all of the vodka mixed into it.
Yeah, it's not even Jell-O shots because they're not shot shaped. So this is practically dinner. I'm sure there's vitamins in here somewhere.
I'm not convinced by Jello and vodka as a dinner meal, but I hope you're enjoying it.
I am. That was a joke. I had real dinner, I promise. I'm not that irresponsible.
It's true. I saw her eat it. We were on the call as she was eating.
Anyway, have you read anything good lately?
I have had a lot of difficulty reading lately, actually. I don't have the focus for like long fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So I've read a lot of fan fiction and I've read a lot of novellas. The most recent novella that I read was The Drowned Heir by Jennifer Donahue, whose name I've discovered, thank you, Jennifer, is pronounced Donahue and not Donahue as we pronounced it in our episode on Run with the Hunted. But this is a novella that just came out about monsters, and I think she markets it as like kind of spooky. It's not really spooky, but it's essentially like this culture. Someone dies, like there is a person who gets drowned and their spirit like inhabits that body. It's really interesting. So it was a really good novella. I liked it a lot.
It's like how I would argue that monster movies are not actually horror movies, even if they are similar realms.
Yeah, like it has mildly spooky vibes, but it's not spooky, you know?
Right. It doesn't make you feel discombobulated while you're reading it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as expected from her, like it plays with tropes and it's very good.
Well, it sounds good. I do like spooky adjacent things. I like spooky things as well, but I know my audience, which is Sarah.
I'm generally not a spooky thing person.
Well, I did not read something, although I kind of did. I intended to read something.
What did you not read?
There was an article recommended to me that I clicked on because it's just garbage clickbait, but it's garbage clickbait for me and it knew me, but it was behind a paywall. So we're just going to guess about the contents of the article. But the headline reads, Amazon's poorly received Rings of Power series could hurt Prime subscriptions. Sarah, this is it. This is the answer we've been looking for. Rings of Power was never meant to be a Middle-earth adaptation. All it is a tool to bring down Amazon. And what better use could you think of for Middle-earth? We are seeing Orthanc crumble before our eyes.
I thought the headline that you were going to talk about was going to be the Rings of Power. Are you team Elon Musk or team Neil Gaiman?
What?
Because there has been not beef on Twitter, but like Elon Musk has tweeted things about Rings of Power and not liking it. And Gaiman had like a quote tweet and he said, let me find his tweet because it was like a great clapback. So Gaiman tweeted, Elon Musk doesn't come to me for advice on how to fail to buy Twitter, and I don't go to him for film, TV, or literature criticism, which was great. And then apparently a lot of like Elon Musk fans started coming at Neil Gaiman because they thought that he had anything to do with the Rings of Power, which he doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's been a whole thing. He's had a lot of patience with them, more patience than I would have. But it's very funny to like be on the outside watching this because it's just a whole lot of crazy.
I mean, everything Elon Musk does is a whole lot of crazy.
Also true.
And a broken clock can be right twice a day.
I mean, I think his criticism of Rings of Power is, I'm not disagreeing that it's bad. I didn't enjoy the first 2 episodes. But I do think that his criticism of how it's bad is bad.
Oh, see, I'm out of the loop there. I did have a whole conversation with my friend, though, about how people are wrong about why it's bad.
Yes.
For example, casting Black people, not the reason. Like, holy shit, you guys, so not the reason.
Yeah, I think...
And how dare you put me in a position to defend this show?
He was saying something about how all of the men are weak and Galadriel is unlikable, which I do actually agree that Galadriel is unlikable, but like his implication was that a woman can't kick ass.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he would he's not wrong about it
Yeah.
being bad, in my opinion, but he's wrong about how it's bad.
People are only allowed to dislike things for the exact reason why I dislike them. I don't know if you know that, but that's actually true.
That is how the world works.
And you know it's true because I have a podcast.
That is how the world works.
I should not even be participating in this conversation. I have had better things to do than watch the show, like edit 3 episodes in 1 week.
That's very valid.
I'll get around to it eventually. I'm not watching it. Like, I'm not protesting it or anything.
Yeah.
I just have things I need to do, like the dishes.
I watched the first 2 episodes. I will eventually watch the rest of the show, but I'm here recording this instead of sitting at my TV watching the new episode. So I was not particularly favorably impressed by the show. It's pretty. I'll grant them that. It's very pretty.
Well, with that much money behind it, if it wasn't, holy shit.
Yes.
Anyway, this is not actually a complaint about why everyone is wrong about the exact way in which Rings of Power is a bad show. This is actually Complain About Interesting Times by Terry Pratchett.
Which I'm so sad about. But yeah, this is time to complain about interesting times.
Okay, you have said before that the Rincewind books are your favorite Discworld series. Am I recalling that correctly?
You are recalling that correctly.
I assume that this did not count or factor into that.
No. Like, I really enjoy what happens to Rincewind in this book, but I do not enjoy like all of the anti-Asian racism in it, of which there is quite a lot.
Yeah, it's not even like that one little corner of, wow, that's not how the Aztecs worked in, which book was that? Color of Magic or whatever? No, it wasn't. It was one of the other Rincewind books. The Rincewind, was it Rincewind? Not the point. The point is, you cannot escape it in this book. It is just like every paragraph, every page.
It's bad. I mean, it's real bad.
There were parts that it wasn't the focus, and you could sort of immerse yourself back into, yeah, Rincewind's hijinks are pretty fun. And yeah, Cohen the barbarian is a very old man who kicks ass, and that's pretty silly, isn't it?
I really enjoy like the Horde and that whole premise.
Being Cohen's group of octogenarian barbarians.
Yes, the Silver Horde.
Yes.
They're great. And I might have even said this on air in previous episodes that I really liked this book. And that was, in my defense, that was before I reread it. Or reread it recently. The last time I read it was, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years ago.
There's some good commentary about political revolution and young fuckheads with a savior complex.
Yeah.
Like, there's some really good commentary on that, but the whole thing is just wrapped up in such a gnarly shit bow that it's really hard to get through that.
Yeah, it makes it really unpleasant to read, to be perfectly honest. Just and the way it's not focused on one specific Asian culture, it's just like taking pot shots at everything. It's a mishmash.
Well, isn't that part of what makes it racist? The implication that everything east of India is just all one big thing?
It's all interchangeable. Yeah.
Like, to me, that was part of the problem. And so if he had even just, I mean, so much at the beginning, it was, you know, he was trying to build ancient China, and then he just starts throwing in bad, like, weeaboo-esque references to Japan that it was like, oh no. Okay, I can get behind shitting on an empire. Any empire. Like, any empire has done stuff that you can complain about. I'm okay with that. But yeah, no, he was just like, also, there's really fat people that they pretend are athletic. It's like, no, that's not
how sumo works.
Oh boy. No, it's really not.
No.
Also, they're not mindless, and that's not.
He has a comment about how, like, the writing is really slow because they have to draw out all of these characters, and like that's not how writing works.
Well, I mean, it is, especially if you're a monk in medieval England and doing like fancy manuscripts, but he wasn't making fun of them, was he?
No. Calligraphy, that's slow, sure.
Mm-hmm.
In any language, in any like writing system.
Exactly, yeah.
But like kanji, for example, is not inherently slower to write than Roman letters.
Yeah, it was this book was a doozy, huh?
Yeah.
It was not avoidable, but yeah, it was when he started pulling in other references that I was just like, oof, nope. Mm-mm.
Well, like if the plot had been just like revolution against an empire,
Mm-hmm.
even if the setting is, Discworld Chinese, like that doesn't necessarily, you're not necessarily inherently poking fun at the Chinese culture when you do that.
And there would have been a reason, because Cohen, the barbarian, was the barbarian who was getting over the wall. And so there was at least a reason to set it in a place that had a wall instead of just these people have stupid names, which was basically the joke every other sentence.
Yeah. Pratchett can do better.
I don't know, we can hack through some of that. Just assume every sentence we say for the rest of the podcast has the little footnote of, oh yeah, except for all of that racism.
Yes. And to be fair, not that this is a valid defense. It should not be a valid defense. This was written in 1994.
I mean,
or copyrighted in 1994 anyway. That's not a valid defense.
It's just as gross, but it's less appalling that he wrote it, I think is what I would say.
Yeah. I mean, there were plenty of people who were writing non-racist books in 1994.
Yeah. The luggage is funny, though.
I did like the luggage.
We're going to be grasping at straws so hard.
I will say, probably because the last time I reread this, I was not older than 26. I did not really notice that Lord Hong, who is the villain in this book, is only 26. And so I got there and I was like, oh no, I feel old.
Yeah. He was the not figurehead, the opposite of the figurehead. Who's the one who controls the figurehead?
I mean, he was the
Grand Vizier, I guess, is the phrase used in the book. Yep. Oh, Flo's gonna be bad tonight, huh?
Probably. I mean, that's not our fault. That's Pratchett's fault.
Okay, so the racism was bad and it was on purpose, and there's not really any getting around that. But there was another element in this book that I feel like was purely on accident, but if you stop and think about it for even 2 seconds, it becomes extremely uncomfortable very fast. And that is the fact that there's a running joke that Rincewind, the main character, was stuck on a desert island for so long that he mixed up his hunger cues and his libido, and now he interprets sexy women as potatoes.
Okay. I have to stop you there because I don't think that he's getting his libido mixed up. I think that he just really wants potatoes. And Pratchett is making fun of the fact that the trope that, sexy women always want to repopulate their tribe or whatever with the one man who's left on the island, which in this case is Rincewind. And he's just completely ignoring that because he just really wants potatoes. I don't think that his libido has anything to do with it.
I think that scene was not played that way. I don't think it was that he was ignoring it. I think it was that he was so hungry he was not understanding. I thought it was a language barrier thing.
No, I didn't think it was a language barrier because there's nothing else in the scene that makes it seem like he's starving. It's just he really wants potatoes. When you've gone so long and your diet is just one thing and you can't get something that you're used to eating, which he's used to eating potatoes, and you start to focus on that. Because doesn't it talk about how he had plenty of fish or whatever from the luggage killing all of the the predators around the island?
3 figures stepped into his line of vision. They were obviously female. They were abundantly female. They were not wearing a great deal of clothing and seemed to be altogether too fresh from the hairdressers for people who have just been paddling a large war canoe. It goes on to describe how voluptuous they are for another paragraph and a half.
Right, right. But like that is the joke. The joke is not that he's like lusting after them and confusing his hunger feelings for his libido. The joke is that like in movies and things like that, when you see these women who are coming after the most unlikeliest of guys because they're the last one left, like they're always beautiful and perfectly, you know, coiffed and manicured.
Well, yeah, and that part of the joke doesn't bother me at all. It's that it's introduced in this way, and then it keeps getting brought up again and again about female children. Not all children, which would also be weird. Not all people. But the line that specifically bothered me was, "It was a shame to disappoint Lotus Blossom with her body that reminded Rincewind of a plate of crinkle-cut chips."
I mean, I agree it's uncomfortable, but I don't think that there's a libido aspect to it.
Well, then why is it only women who remind him of potatoes?
I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah. I feel like the original joke was, isn't it funny that he wants potatoes more than sex? And then the joke like kind of got lost, and then it was he sees female people as potatoes, and Pratchett didn't realize that he was talking about Lotus Blossom, who is described as a child on that page.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. When you phrase it that way, yes, I agree with you.
Yeah. And I do think that was an accident. I think it was a joke that ran away, but
I still disagree with the confusing his libido, because he's not confusing his libido with wanting potatoes.
There's also the running joke that he has to go get therapy for it several times. I don't know. Maybe confusing is the wrong word, but I definitely don't think it's a platonic love of potatoes that he's getting confused by.
I mean, he just likes potatoes. Who can blame him?
I don't think that flies with the situations in which it comes up.
I think Pratchett does a bad job with this joke. I agree.
Yes. Like the setup was fine. It was funny that he wanted potatoes so bad he didn't notice how big the Amazonians' bazonkers were. Like, that's fine. That's funny. But then it became a recurring joke, and it was like, oh boy, you didn't think this through.
Yes. I agree.
There were some fun references to, I guess it was an earlier Rincewind book, but the idea that the gods of Discworld are just playing a board game with the people and the politics on the disc. I think that's a really fun, not exactly quintessential aspect of Discworld, but that is definitely one of the very strong mental images I have of the series as a whole.
It's definitely a concept that we've seen throughout earlier books.
I'm pretty sure that that's introduced in the very first book, right?
I think so. And I'm pretty sure that we see the lady and her particular, I don't want to say fondness, but usage of Rincewind as one of her pieces. I'm pretty sure that that's in Color of Magic too.
So that was neat seeing some quintessential Discworld tropes coming up.
Yeah. It was also interesting seeing there's kind of, it's almost a throwaway line about a mirror Rincewind where like everything goes right for him, and how if they ever met, actual Rincewind hoped it would be with a weapon in hand. And that was an interesting, not callback because this book predates it, but
setup.
Yeah, an interesting preview of a concept that Pratchett explores further in The Hogfather with the Oh God of Hangovers.
This book also has a oblique foreshadowing to Making Money, which is the Moist von Lipwig book, which is, and so that's only like a 2-book little, I hesitate to even call it a series.
There's at least 3.
Oh, there's 3?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, well, I haven't read them all then. But Rincewind is appalled that this culture values little bits of paper more than gold. A merchant tries to explain that the little bit of paper represents gold, and Rincewind basically invents counterfeiting. That's a concept that there's an entire book about later with
3, yes.
There are 3? Okay.
There are 3.
Except that book has a much less grating setting, and I would argue a more fun main character.
I mean, I like Moist Fun Lipwig, but I do like Rincewind, despite all of the shit in this book that is very unacceptable. I like Rincewind as a character.
He's okay. He doesn't do anything for me. I don't dislike him, but I wouldn't say he's particularly charming for me. Yeah.
That's fair.
Oh, one of the things this book does do nicely for all of the jokes about sex work in this book, it's all just coming up with silly euphemisms for it. At no point are sex workers insulted or spoken down about. They're usually just listed in a list of occupations, and it's funny because it's a goofy euphemism next to like lawyers and tax collectors.
They're rarely the butt of the joke. And I think that's true in his earlier Discworld books too that we've read.
Yeah.
Which, like you say, he does a good job with that. Good on you, Pratchett.
The joke is usually, if I recall correctly, how ridiculous it is or how funny it is, how uncomfortable people are around the concept.
Mm-hmm.
Like with the silly euphemisms in this book, and that's fine. That can be a joke. I think it's worth pointing out that it wasn't terrible.
Pratchett did get a couple of things right.
Yeah. Like the universal dibbler.
Yes. Which we have seen before. I mean, we've seen other dibblers before.
And I love them every time.
But it's nice to see. I think this is what, like the third dibbler? Because we see one in
Pyramids.
Small Gods.
Oh, Small Gods. Yeah, that's the one. I get those confused for no reason.
Equal Rights and Small Gods?
No, I said Pyramids.
Oh, no, I get Equal Rights and Small Gods confused.
Really?
Yeah. I think it's because I associate the title Equal Rights with something religious.
Pyramids and Small Gods both take place in a desert setting. That's my excuse.
Also understandable.
Yeah. But anyway, every setting has a cut me own throat dibbler who is trying to sell dodgy products and scam people out of money to the best of his abilities. And that's just a universal human archetype. That's not a comment on the particular setting because he's universal. And isn't that beautiful in a way?
It also doesn't feel like a comment on a particular culture because there is the dibbler in Ankh-Morpork who does just that.
Right, exactly. It's more making fun of commercialism than people specifically.
Yeah.
And that we can always punch on.
Yes. That is much better punching ground than, Chinese culture, Asian culture.
Yeah, it's not even Chinese, though.
It's not even Chinese.
And for some reason, that makes it so much worse. I don't know. Like, okay, foot binding, that's fair. You can make fun of that.
Yeah.
Of course, it's weird, too.
Yeah. And he also spends a lot more time making fun of other things than he does making fun of foot binding.
Oh, yeah, no, that's just like a throwaway line that Cohen the Barbarian is like, what? Weird.
Yeah.
And it moves on. Instead of the fact that sumo wrestlers are basically animals because they're fat and therefore cannot think. That was the best I could understand that scene, and it was not flattering for Pratchett.
It was not flattering for Pratchett at all. I don't have anything to add there.
And the sumo wrestlers show up a hell of a lot more than the concept of foot binding. I'll throw that. Yeah.
Or like making fun of names. That shows up a lot.
Yeah. Well, if you manage to get through all of that bullshit, you do get to some comments on political revolutions that weren't terrible.
Yeah. I mean, Pratchett has some good commentary on how revolutionaries might have good intentions, but they usually are not actually working towards the good of the people. Or like it's more effective to give the poor something that will actually help them instead of what you think they want.
I will admit that I started writing a very angry note when I got halfway through that paragraph in the book. Because Rincewind starts out by saying, oh, leave everyone alone. And I was like, well, tell all the 9-year-olds who die in coal mines that they should be left alone. Like, I bet that they would like someone to do something about it. And then it continues on with, provide education. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. Figure out what's actually helpful. I agree with that.
The earlier context to that whole like inner monologue is about how no one who is on the People's Committee, which is what the revolutionaries want to like institute instead of an emperor, no one on that committee would actually like be part of that lower class or come from that lower class. So how could they necessarily like know what was most effective?
Okay, that's true, and I agree with that, but it does grate against me the idea that you're not one of them, so you shouldn't help them.
That's fair.
Like, no, people need allies, and sometimes if you're part of the group that's in power, you have a position where you can do something.
But I think the whole thing there is like, yes, you should be an ally and you should do something, but like you can't exclude the people you're helping.
Oh, I mean, I agree.
Which is the point that I think Rincewind is trying to make and maybe not necessarily eloquently making.
I agree with that, especially when you, like you said, consider the audience, which is basically young, dumb douchebags with a savior complex.
Yes.
And I agree that young, dumb douchebags with a savior complex need to have some sense shaken into them before they do more harm than good. But I think part of his commentary is a little bit too general.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be never do anything to help the lower class, which is how he starts. He gets there. It comes back. Like I said, I wrote my whole thing down in my notes and then was like, oh, no, okay. Yeah, good point.
I can't actually ding Pratchett too much for this one.
Yeah, no. That was just me not reading the whole paragraph before I started angrily note-taking. Well, Sarah, we've come to that point.
Yep.
Why should you read this book? When should you read this book? Should you read this book?
I think you still should read this book, but I think you should read this book with the knowledge that it's very racist in very uncomfortable ways. And you should not start with this book because it is very racist in very uncomfortable ways.
This feels like a bottom of the barrel. I have read every single other Discworld book that exists, but I want more Discworld, so I guess I'm settling for interesting times.
I mean, I think like if you're reading the Rincewind books, read them in order. That's fine. Because this does set up some context for the next Rincewind book at the very end. Not that you can't skip this book and still understand what's going on. You absolutely can. But there is that context that you miss.
I would read a different series before I said someone should read this as part of the Rincewind series. But like I said, the Rincewind books are really not for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
I mean, if someone didn't want to deal with racist bullshit, that's
sure
fair.
That's
read
valid.
A different series.
Yeah, like that's valid, and you should skip this book if you don't want to deal with racist bullshit. Like I'm not saying that you have to read this book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying that like if you're interested in Rincewind and reading the Rincewind books, I wouldn't necessarily recommend skipping it unless you don't want to deal with racist bullshit, which is again a very valid reason.
Yeah. Read this book if you think old men hijinks are charming. I liked that part. Cohen the Barbarian is fun.
When you ignore the racism.
He's not even the worst part, though.
No.
It's the narrative of the novel that's bad. Cohen himself isn't too bad.
He plays into it.
Yeah, okay, fair. They all do.
They all do. Every character in this does. Yes, I'm not disagreeing there.
Yeah, I don't know. This was a hard one. I probably would not reread this book. Apparently, I had read it before. I remembered basically nothing about it. Remembering what it's about, though, I would probably just skip it in a reread. I don't think it brings anything to the table, really, that's worth putting up with everything else for.
I would reread it, but it is not going to be a go-to book for me. Like, I would reread it as part of a reread of the whole series.
But that's just the completionist in you. That's not because it's a good book.
Yeah, if I'm looking to reread a specific book in the Discworld series by itself, this is probably not going to be that book.
You should only read this book if you are just trying to put a notch on your bedpost for every single Discworld book. That's the reason to read this book. If you're not going for a 100% complete achievement, then yeah, totally skip this one.
Yeah, it makes me really sad because I used to, when I was a kid and didn't know any better, I did really enjoy this book. As an adult, I cannot, yeah.
To avoid spoilers, skip to 5220. You know what I really think this book should have done? It's kind of a shame it didn't go far enough. Instead of just saying, don't bother with the revolution, just leave the peasants in the mud and shit, that's fine. It needed to go a step farther and offer an actual solution. Okay, if this solution is bad, which we agree, this solution is bad, it's not a solution. It just perpetrates the problem with different people in charge. What is the solution then? This should have been a pro-union book, Sarah.
I agree that they should have asked what the peasants wanted. I don't know if the peasants would have had the words for they want a union, but they did deserve a union.
Reading this, I was just like, damn, I want to start the union of people who hold the string that oxen are tied to.
Water buffalo.
Water buffalo, which is the main job that we see. They just want longer strings. That's pretty doable. Those union negotiations would be easy.
In theory, they would be easy anyway.
Well, sure.
I think the people also need lawyers.
Yes. All right. Not that the system we have is functional at all, but at least there's some recourse if you get fired for a stupid reason, or a discriminatory reason. Stupid reasons are fine. Discriminatory ones are not. But in Discworld, you just get beheaded. And you can't even say, hey, wait, you went against the contract. And using sneaky weasel words is not how contracts work. This is obviously what the contract meant that both people signed. You can't get away with that. I am Lily, the defense lawyer of Discworld peasants. I actually think it would be really cool to have a character that's like, I guess it wouldn't be a defense lawyer. I guess they would be a contract lawyer who represent people going into like devil's contracts or like making genie wishes.
That I agree. I would read that book. And to be fair, I think Ankh-Morpork does have lawyers. I think Mr. Slant is his name, is a zombie, and he's the head of the Lawyers Guild.
Ah, but this doesn't take place in Ankh-Morpork.
This does not take place in Ankh-Morpork. And Mr. Slant does not work for the peasants because the peasants cannot pay.
I feel like this book mixes up misguided revolutions with the importance of workers' rights, or I'm just reading way too far into it because I was trying to find something I could latch onto, and I couldn't even have that.
I think that might be the book that Pratchett would write today, but it's not the book that he wrote in 1994.
Makes me think of young, dumb, rich kids who go to underdeveloped countries and build houses, but then like all of the houses have to end up being torn down as soon as they leave because they don't know how to build a house. Voluntourism, I think, is another good word for it. Like, yeah, let's make fun of those douchebags.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little bit of it here, and I think that's where it was going, but I wanted it to go harder so that I could ignore the racism more.
It should have gone harder on that aspect. Yeah.
There's a character in this book that we have not talked about at all because we've been complaining about.
We haven't really talked about the characters in this book because we've been so concerned with discussing the other very major issues with it.
Well, Butterfly is one of the young revolutionaries, and she immediately sniffs out that Rincewind is a fraud. He is brought in specifically to trick the revolutionaries. It's all very, very tricksy and political. But she can tell right away that he's actually a bogus wizard there just to hurt their cause, basically.
I mean, I would like to clarify a little bit that he's not there. He is not intending to hurt their cause. But the person who has had him brought there, who Butterfly doesn't realize is that person in particular, intends for him to hurt their cause.
Yes, you're right. He doesn't want anything to do with anything. He was brought there under duress. But the Lord Hong, I think it was.
Yes. Hong has manipulated events so that Rincewind has been brought over.
Because the rebels want to rally behind the Great Wizard, and so Lord Hong found an incompetent wizard to make them think is the Great Wizard. It's actually a pretty good plot if you think about it on his part, as much as he's a bad guy.
It is, I mean, he would be a successful bad guy if it weren't for his failings as a human being.
Doesn't that make him a bad guy? Okay, but she figures this out immediately. She can tell that Rincewind is not who other people say he is. However, 100 pages later, Rincewind is trying to convince her that the rebellion storming the castle and killing the emperor is also part of this grand scheme, and Butterfly just will not have it. And I was like, how can you be so astute and perceptive when you first meet Rincewind? And then he's trying to explain that, hey, a pile of swords and a map to the emperor seems fishy.
To be fair, I think the problem there is the messenger. She knows he's incompetent. Thus, what he is saying must also be incompetent.
I guess. But a pile of swords and a map, I mean, that's okay, that's silly Discworld stuff, but
I think I agree that she should be listening to him and that it's a little silly that she doesn't, because what he's saying is making a lot of sense. But I can also see someone just completely not believing in the competency of someone else. Like, that really does affect how you listen to them or don't listen to them.
That's true.
And how seriously you take what they say.
That's true. Yeah.
Especially when you're so passionate about your cause, which she is, and you're like, we have the means to go and do this. Let's just go and do this.
So you're saying it's in character, but I can still be annoyed by it.
Yes.
Excellent.
I think it's in character, but I do think it's something that you can be annoyed about.
And to be fair, she does eventually come around pretty late, but not like after it's too late. So that's fine. All right, whatever.
Yeah, that's part of why I think it's in character. Like, she does eventually listen to reason once she has convinced herself.
Well, speaking of Butterfly, the fact that she is Two Flower's daughter comes completely out of nowhere. Two Flower being Rincewind's traveling companion in the very first Discworld novels. And then there's this whole, like, dark, dramatic backstory about Two Flower's wife. And you're like, holy shit, wait, what? There are 5 pages left in the novel. We're dealing with all of this right now? Okay.
When you first wrote this bullet point in our notes, I was really going to argue because I was like, it doesn't come out of left field or anything. No, I knew about it from the beginning. And then I realized, yeah, that's because I'm rereading this book. And when I think about it logically, it really does come out of nowhere. It's not really foreshadowed very much at all.
So you remembered that Butterfly was his daughter, which does imply that there is a mother. And so in that way, that sure, yes, that foreshadows that there is a mother involved at some point. But I think what you hadn't realized was how late we even find out that Butterfly is Two Flower's kid.
Yeah.
That's on page 349 out of 368.
that is quite late.
So the foreshadowing that he has a wife is on page 349. We find out that his wife tragically died, and then he tries to avenge her by getting in a one-on-one fight with Lord Hong, all in those 20 pages.
It is a lot. You're right. Yeah, it would have been better, I think, to have a little more clues a little earlier on.
Even just Butterfly saying that she's doing this because her mother died in a tragic accident that could have been avoided if their government was less rancid is not the word I'm looking for. Corrupt.
I mean, I think rancid counts.
It was a little more poetic than I was going for. But something like that would have at least given us a little bit of an idea that this character is going to come up later. Instead of just bam.
Yeah, it does feel kind of like Pratchett just wanted these characters to be related because he did, not because there is any like story reason for them to be related.
Well, it does give us the excellent, excellent scene when Rincewind gets teleported back to the Unseen University, which all of that is like weird Deus Ex Machina, but like unapologetically Deus Ex Machina. We see the wizards in the university just saying, yeah, let's do this now for absolutely no reason.
And that does feel very in character with the wizards, to be fair.
Yes. And we see them discussing it before it happens.
Yes, crucially, I think.
Yeah.
That is the important bit.
And that was how Rincewind got to the Agitian Empire? The Gatian Empire?
I've always pronounced it as a hard G. A Gatian Empire.
Gatian, sure.
I don't know if that's right.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
That's how he gets to the Agatian Empire in the first place, so it's at least set up a little bit. They had always planned on bringing him back. It just happens to be at the exactly most convenient moment, and that's pretty funny. That's all right.
And also that's pretty in keeping with, Discworld in general, to be fair.
That's so over the top that it's goofy.
Yeah.
And so Rincewind gets yanked away, and a cannon gets put in his place because they have to be swapped. And so instead of having to face Lord Hong in a duel, Two Flower gets to watch him be blown up by a cannon. And that was pretty satisfying.
It was, but I still think that there's no story reason for Lotus Blossom and Butterfly to be his kids.
No.
He can still have the wife, but them being his children does not add any emotional depth to the story, really, because we get that reveal so late.
Yeah. And I guess Butterfly does mention when Rincewind questions why the rebellion is entirely children. She brings up that, when all of the workers are worked to death, they leave orphans behind. So I guess there's kind of a hint. That's not a hint. That's so vague.
Does Two Flowers say something about family when he's locked in a cell with Rincewind? I don't actually remember.
Maybe. If he did, I didn't catch it.
I feel like he might. I don't actually remember, so I'm not going to bet any money on it.
All right.
If he does, that's a hint. That is at least earlier than those last 20 pages.
Oh, even that's pretty late in the book, though.
It is, it is pretty late in the book. I think that Pratchett does a much better job at hinting to the reader that Two Flower was the one who wrote What I Did on My Vacation, this revolutionary pamphlet that's being handed around, than he does at hinting that Two Flower has 2 kids and a dead wife, a tragically dead wife.
I agree there. Because every time Rincewind hears a snippet of it, he's like, hey, doesn't that sound familiar? And so I agree. It comes up enough that you're like, there's something going on here.
Yeah. And I do genuinely like that. And I think it is funny and well done.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the names are stupid and bad. The name jokes. But the mistranslations did not bother me too much. The idea that people trying to speak a different language end up saying absurdly different words than they meant to. That felt, if it hadn't been in this book, it would have been like, oh, haha, monolingual people can't speak different languages.
Yeah, I think because of how it was done, the concept by itself is not bad. But because of the rest of the context of the book, it felt, especially because it was specifically making fun of how tonal Chinese is, it felt like another way of making fun of Chinese rather than making fun of monolingual people.
In a different context, I think it would just be like, haha, yeah, sometimes you mess up when you're trying to speak a language you don't know.
Right. That's why in a different context, you're right. It would feel like making fun of monolingual people. And in this context, it felt like making fun of Chinese, the language, to me.
I don't think it changed that drastically. I think it just felt like it was piling on. But maybe I'm splitting hairs and that's the same thing.
I think that's splitting hairs. Yeah. Because if you felt like it was piling on, then you felt like it was making fun of Chinese.
Yeah, no, you're right. And especially with the combination of, I think it's mostly with the names, because that's also a language thing, right? They're forcefully translating names, which you wouldn't normally do.
Yeah.
I don't know, the joke that arg means something different in different languages. And so when people get...
That was a genuinely good joke because it was not culture specific.
Mm-hmm.
It was here are a variety of different meanings of arg.
And all of the different hijinks that people have gotten into because they, I agree. That was the best way to execute the joke. Even the bad dialogue, or I say bad dialogue, but misspoken dialogue got old because it's not actually that funny. The dialogue itself was never that funny that they said on accident.
Yeah.
So it just meant that they had to repeat themselves. And I was like, are you just padding this book out?
And again, I think if we didn't have the wider racism in the book, it wouldn't have been something to really note.
I still think it would have gotten tiresome, actually.
It might have gotten tiresome.
But that's a far cry from upsetting.
Yeah, like I wouldn't have read it as racist the way
Yeah.
that I did read it as racist.
Yeah, I agree. Do we have anything nice to end on for this book?
I'm looking forward to The Last Continent, and I hope that it's not as racist as this one.
Is that what you're referring to when you say that this book sets up the next one? That Rincewind is magically teleported to the last continent? Because I bet they'll explain that at the beginning of the next book.
Yes, that is what I mean.
I don't think that's necessary context.
I don't think, like, again, which I think I said, like, you can skip this book. You're not going to be lost without it.
We both have a completionist urge. And I think that that is maybe to our disadvantage sometimes.
Yeah, maybe.
I agree. I'm that person who does every single side quest in a video game.
Yeah, that's why I don't finish video games.
Yeah.
Because I try to be a completionist and I should not.
Well, maybe Interesting Times is another example. You know, the title of this book is very good. I love the concept that may you live in interesting times is the like most cutting insult you can say to someone.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
There is that saying, which is attributed to a Chinese proverb. It's not actually a Chinese proverb, but it is a thing, like a real world, a round world thing. I looked it up once.
It is claimed to be a translation of a traditional Chinese curse.
Yeah.
It's apocryphal. There is no actual Chinese source.
Yeah. That is, if I may say what I just said.
Yeah, sorry. I was Googling it while you were saying things, but I am backing you up and reading from Wikipedia.
which is where my original knowledge comes from.
Yes, but now we can say it's from Wikipedia. It's not just from your head, because sometimes that's wrong.
That's fair.
Instead of reading it out loud, I could have just said, yes, I found a source that agrees with you. How's that?
Yes, thank you.
So there is one line in this book that really threw me for a loop. On page 354, Cohen the Barbarian says, I guess I should get the actual quote out.
Probably. That might help.
There's a point in this book during which Rincewind is in peril. That's not a spoiler. That's like the whole book.
That is literally the plot of this book.
Rincewind's plot. His character arc is being in peril. So at one point, Cohen goes to rescue him, and his other barbarian buddies are like, what are you doing? He's a wizard. And Cohen says, Rincewind's a weasel, but he's our weasel. And I was like, is weasel really the word for that? I don't know. That just feels so much more sinister.
It doesn't feel sinister to me. I also did not point this out when you were talking, but you did use weasel out of the situation earlier in our conversation.
Well, okay, weaseling out of something is definitely a phrase, probably because this word was in my head because we've had this for
Yes.
I'm such an awful magpie for words. Sometimes when I'm editing episodes, I'll realize that our guest said a phrase and then I use that same phrase like 4 times in the rest of the episode. And I'm like, do I have a brain or do I just repeat shit that I hear? Anyway, I would not call Rincewind a weasel. I think weaseling out is very different from being a weasel.
I don't know. I don't think that there's as big of a difference between those two phrases as you do.
The connotations. Okay, I don't dislike weasels. This is not me saying that weasels are bad animals, but I think the connotations of the phrase to be a weasel is just so much more antagonistic than like a chicken. I would call Rincewind a chicken, not a weasel.
I don't know. I don't know how to explain my aversion to the phrase a chicken in conjunction with Rincewind, whereas I don't mind weasel. And I'm not sure it's actually logical when I really think about it, because like I don't have an argument there.
Weaseling out is absolutely applicable to him.
Yeah.
But I do think using the word just weasel as an adjective instead of weaseling out as a verb does feel different to me.
But I don't know. I feel like calling him a chicken is technically accurate because he is kind of afraid of everything. But I don't think it has the connotation of being able to get out of situations the way that Weasel does, because Rincewind isn't just afraid of things, he is afraid of things and he gets out of situations. I feel like Weasel describes that overall better than Chicken does.
Well, I wikied it. Definitions of the word weasel imply deception and irresponsibility, referring to sneaky, untrustworthy, or insincere people.
I don't think Rincewind is insincere, but I do think he's untrustworthy.
He's always very honest that he is going to try to get out of the situation.
Yes, but you should not trust him to like back you up.
Oh, maybe I'm interpreting untrustworthy as, yeah, you're right. Insincere is a different word. He's always very honest.
Yeah.
So he's not untrustworthy in that you cannot trust his word.
Yes.
He will always give you his word that he is going to run away.
Yes, but you cannot count on him for backup. I mean,
but he never claims that you can.
No, but like that doesn't, I feel like that is a different nuance.
So I think trustworthy and reliable, well, even reliable, he reliably always runs away.
Yeah, but I think you can still say like it's all about how you're approaching this, right? Like, sure, he reliably runs away, but he is not reliable in a situation because you know he's going to run away.
That's true. And that's even part of the book, right? Things are always uncertain, or things are so certain that they'll always be uncertain, except when Rincewind is involved, and then things are certainly uncertain, or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe all of those definitions, or most of them, can technically apply to him. I just feel like that word has more negative connotations than felt right.
I think it's funny that I'm the one who likes Rincewind, but you're the one who's arguing that he should not be called a weasel.
Yeah, because he's not a weasel, he's a chicken. And I don't dislike him, I just am not into his books, which is
But
different.
I don't think that chicken involved, like, a chicken is just scared. They don't necessarily like try to get out of it.
I think of chickens as running away. You don't think of chickens as running away?
No, I think of chickens as like ostriching.
That's an ostrich, isn't it?
That is an ostrich. But like I think of chickens as like hiding and freezing, not necessarily running away.
Interesting. I think of like the game chicken, where the whole point is the person who avoids danger, like turns away from danger, is the chicken.
I don't think that.
But that's more of an argument of how the word is used in popular language, not how do we feel like the animal behaves.
Yes.
Because I don't think real chickens run away. Real chickens are mean motherfuckers.
Yeah, that's also very true.
Weasel's a weird word, huh?
It is a weird word.
I feel like we had to get the word weird in there somehow.
I still think that it applies to Rincewind, or I don't disagree with its application towards Rincewind, but
it's not technically wrong, it just has the wrong vibe, is what I think.
I don't mind the vibe.
All right.
But I will agree with you that it's a weird word. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find our show notes and a little bit of other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye.
Bye.